Inside the Golden Silk Clan headquarters, a sharp object flies past, leaving a small cut on Vice Captain Lionel's cheek. Captain Luke loudly scolds him for always complaining. Lionel tries to calm his teammate down and explain, but Luke retorts that even though Lionel is the vice captain and can worry about the Gallia clan's affairs, others shouldn't meddle in his love life. Lionel insists he has no intention of interfering, but advises Luke to keep his personal and professional lives separate. The story flashes back to 2 months ago, when a beautiful girl named Fina joined the guild, and Luke fell in love with her at first sight. The problem was the special treatment she received despite being a newcomer. She was quickly promoted to captain and given a salary equal to that of veteran members, forcing Vice Captain Lionel to listen to countless complaints from the members who argued that Fina hadn't been tested and was too inexperienced to give orders. Lionel grew concerned and advised Luke that if he truly loved her, he should consider marrying her and settling down. Back in the present, Lionel reminds Luke that while he has the right to marry anyone he wants, it shouldn't affect his work. Luke flies into a rage, slamming his fist on the table and accusing Lionel of always preaching as if he were morally superior. Finally, Lionel can't take it anymore, yelling that they're the same age, and even if Luke were his son, he would never let him act so foolishly. This is the last straw for Luke, who immediately fires Lionel. In response, Lionel angrily says, "There's no need to take it back, because he'll never return," then slams the door and leaves alone. Luke reflects, realizing this is the second time Lionel has been exiled from the clan. Outside, Lionel recalls that this isn't the first time he and Luke have clashed. They founded the clan together over 10 years ago, going through countless life-or-death moments to become one of the most famous clans in the city. But 5 years ago, Lionel was kicked out once before. As the group became wealthier, Luke squandered their money on drinking, gambling, and women. Lionel confronted him about his extravagant lifestyle, which led to his expulsion less than 6 months later. However, Luke had begged Lionel to come back, saying no one else could handle the role of vice captain. Reluctantly, Lionel agreed, hoping Luke had changed, but now he's been kicked out for a second time. Lionel questions his own decision. As he considers giving up the adventurer's path, he notices a commotion in front of the adventurer's guild. Curious, he approaches and sees 3 young girls desperately begging for another chance. Jennifer, the receptionist, explains that the girls have been expelled for failing to pay their patronage fees. Being kicked out of the guild means losing access to the market and quests. Lionel asks Suki, a girl in armor, if they are really out of money. Jennifer says they should still have money since they completed 2 quests, but the girls lament that the money was all gone after splitting it evenly. In tears, Suki grabs Lionel's hand, trembling as she asks, "What are we supposed to do now?" Lionel observes Suki's sword and asks if she possesses the rare ability of a hero. Suki is surprised but confirms it and introduces her 2 companions, Misha, a cleric blessed by Saint Talon, and Mirialia, a mage who possesses the sage skill. They are childhood friends, almost like sisters. Lionel realizes their party composition is perfectly balanced in terms of skills. A hero, a saint, and a sage, with abilities for both close and long-range combat, as well as quick recovery. The only thing they lacked was a leader to coordinate their tactics. Remembering his plan to give up being an adventurer, Lionel tells himself he has no obligation to help the girls. However, their pleading eyes make it impossible for him to resist. In the end, he agrees to pay their patronage fees for them. At first, the girls are surprised and refuse, but they then joyfully accept it, desperately pleading with him not to abandon them. Lionel wondered what kind of trouble he'd gotten himself into this time, as he reassured the girls that he wouldn't leave. He realized he couldn't go back to his old party for his pay and would soon have to find a new job. He told Jennifer that helping these young adventurers would be his final act. Suki then asked if his talent was truly that of a strategist, a rare ability. The 3 girls immediately offered him a spot in their party. When Lionel asked why, Suki explained that they became adventurers to help people in need, and since Lionel had helped them, they felt he shared their values and wanted to invite him to join. Lionel mused that perhaps supporting heroes was his destiny. But he also confessed that he was fired from his old party for being too blunt. Mirialia laughed, saying she actually needed someone like that in her life, while Misha added that the three of them often struggled to be direct with each other, and having Lionel would help them get along better. At that moment, Lionel realized he might actually be a good fit for this group. Lionel extended his hand and accepted their invitation to join. He felt a sense of satisfaction becoming part of the new party, but immediately got down to business. Since the party was running out of money, his first priority was to stabilize their finances. Lionel asked each member to report their current funds. Suki had 2 silver coins and Mirialia had 1 gold coin, while Misha had spent all of hers on food and donations to the church. Lionel wondered how they planned to eat dinner and realized these 3 were far too carefree. So much so that they hadn't anticipated being kicked out of the guild. He turned to Jennifer and asked if there were any urgent quests. Jennifer told him that the Hayden farm was under constant attack by goblins. Lionel picked up a pen and asked his companions for their party's name. Suki replied that the party's name was Hope. Lionel felt it was an ambitious name. As they headed to the farm to face the goblins, Suki declared that this quest would be a piece of cake. Lionel warned her not to underestimate the situation, because while a single goblin might be easy to deal with, they're terrifying when they swarm. Before he could finish his sentence, they heard the sound of approaching goblins. He told the girls to fight as they normally would so he could observe. Suki immediately charged in alone. In fact, he had been about to warn them that heroes shouldn't recklessly charge into a goblin horde. Mirialia told Lionel to relax and enjoy their legendary battle. Suki leaped over a charging goblin, landed on its back, and swiftly cut off its head. Lionel noted she fought in a wild, chaotic style, relying on agility instead of tactics, a style he deemed unsustainable. Another goblin rushed in to attack her, striking her in the back and sending her flying. However, Lionel saw Misha quickly cast a healing spell, while Mirialia provided cover with a barrage of magic missiles. After being fully healed, Suki jumped back up, eagerly charging into battle again. Misha proudly told Lionel that this was their unbeatable strategy. Suki draws the enemies in, falls back to get healed, and Mirialia destroys them. Then they just repeat the process as needed. Lionel yelled that they had only survived so far thanks to sheer luck. Just as Suki was surrounded, Lionel intervened, cutting down a goblin that was about to stab her. He told her to focus and instructed Mirialia to target the fleeing goblins, and asked Misha to protect the mages and deal with a few approaching goblins. Working as a team, they finished the battle in just 30 seconds, surprising Suki and Lionel. Meanwhile, Lionel wondered when this promising rookie would become the clan's shining hope. Back at the Golden Silk clan headquarters, Luke offered to promote Fina to vice captain. She felt honored but also hesitant, remembering Lionel as a wonderful person, while Luke only remembered him as a grumbler. Luke asserted that although many people could replace Lionel, no one could replace Fina in his heart. Encouraged, Fina accepted the position. On the first floor, the former members eavesdropped on the conversation and lamented that it was really over. Joshua advised everyone to keep the faith, reminding them of a similar situation 5 years ago. Back then, they were afraid the clan would fall apart, but they held on to their belief in their strong bond of brotherhood. However, Nicole pointed out that Fina's presence had changed everything. Joshua added that their captain often jumped to conclusions and acted impulsively, which was why they needed Lionel. Even so, he still believed the former vice captain would return and suggested they take on as many missions as possible while they waited. Nicole, however, was skeptical that Lionel would return as easily as last time. Outside a small house in the countryside, Lionel was cooking, doing laundry, and enjoying the peace and the surrounding scenery. Suki excitedly ran out the door, eager to show Lionel the new symbol she had embroidered on her outfit. He nonchalantly remarked that it suited her, but she urged him to say it with more feeling. He replied that they should focus on getting the fabric first, and Suki went inside, acting like a child following a parent's instructions. Lionel wondered how he'd ended up in this domestic situation. A few days earlier, after completing some missions, the Hope clan was on their way home. They followed a path through the forest until they reached a house by the river. However, Lionel was shocked to see it was just a dilapidated old shack. The three girls, overjoyed to be home, quickly stripped off their clothes and jumped into the river to bathe. Lionel, meanwhile, gathered and folded the discarded clothes. They explained that there was no kitchen, so they always ate out, and none of them knew how to cook. Back in the present, Lionel had set up a clothesline in a constant effort to bring some order to their lives. He sympathized with them, understanding that as orphans, they were just grateful to have a place to sleep. Tasting the soup, he planned to get them started on healthy meals suitable for adventurers. When Mirelia and Misha returned, they were rolling a large black pot. Lionel was pleased, but noticed Misha's mouth was watering as she imagined how many servings she could devour. He explained that it wasn't for cooking. They placed the pot on a pile of rocks, planning to light a fire under it so they could all keep warm together. Misha sheepishly admitted that she had overspent on meat, thinking they were going to have a feast. Lionel was slightly annoyed by the wasted money, realizing he wouldn't be able to return to the clan house anytime soon, as they would have to take on more missions to earn money. Later, they were in a grassy field facing a pack of wolves. Mirelia cast a magic bullet that nearly hit Suki. Lionel reminded her to be mindful of the mage's line of fire. Suki nodded and charged toward the wolf pack. Lionel smiled in satisfaction and joined her, moving to the front. Together, they cornered the wolf pack. While Mirelia continued to unleash long-range spells, the now frightened wolves began to huddle together. Lionel ordered Suki to stick close to him, and inwardly, he noted their progress since their first battle with the goblins. They were fighting as a team now, employing tactics that minimized risk. They herded the wolves close together, creating an opportunity for Mirelia to unleash a powerful spell. One wolf managed to sneak up behind her, but Misha quickly intervened, taking it down and then immediately casting a long-range healing spell on Suki at the perfect moment. Lionel observed that with their new approach, both the frontliners and the backliners could fight with confidence. That evening, back at the clan house, the members of the Hope clan celebrated with beer and meat around a fire. Misha devoured her meat, making the others wonder how she didn't gain any weight. Lionel felt proud of their progress. They could now defeat over 30 monsters and fight from a position of strength. However, he warned them not to get complacent, reminding them that they had only been fighting during the day and in wide-open spaces. He warned that the real danger of monsters lay in their ability to ambush in the dark, and they had to remain vigilant or they would be at risk. Elsewhere, members of the Golden Silk clan heard the Dragnet carriage rumbling through the storm. The road ahead was blocked by a rock slide. Forcing them to find another way, Luke reluctantly ordered them to turn back. While some members grumbled that this wouldn't have happened if Lionel were still around, Luke overheard and angrily ordered them not to speak like that again. Fina looked out from the carriage as Luke sat in the falling rain. At the Adventurers Guild, Lionel was staring intently at the quest board. Jennifer told him to stop whining in front of it, as other adventurers were waiting to check it. He asked if there were any promising jobs that could help him earn enough to buy a warm bed and fix the leaks before winter. She suggested they could map the ruins that had been discovered the other day. Lionel was delighted and signed the papers. Jennifer then shared the latest gossip. The Golden Silk clan had failed their recent mission, arriving 3 days late with a delivery to the royal capital. Lionel guessed they were probably transporting something important, like military supplies, and should have been better prepared for the weather, especially this season. He told the receptionist that they needed to apologize to the client and rebuild their trust. But then he caught himself, realizing it wasn't his problem anymore. After submitting the paperwork, he left, telling himself he had another group to look after. Now, there were also rumors of a rebellion, which could bring lucrative opportunities for adventurers in the future. Lionel returned home, where he was warmly greeted by his team. They were eager to know what quest he had accepted, but he told them to spread out as the floor might collapse if they all gathered in one spot. He explained the mission, which disappointed Suki, as she thought map-making would be boring. However, Lionel explained that unexplored ruins could still hold treasures untouched by time, and that unknown monsters could be lurking inside, which piqued Suki's curiosity. Mirelia, on the other hand, was worried about being ambushed by monsters. and Lionel wondered if he had scared them too much. Sometime later, they arrived at the ruins, which looked like a mid-sized old city. Lionel ordered them to be extra vigilant, especially in the blind spots. Suki stepped forward, ready to take the lead as usual, but Lionel stopped her. He explained that this was more of an exploration than a battle, and rushing in recklessly could trigger ancient traps. Since they had no information on what they might encounter, safety had to be their top priority. Suki acknowledged his concern, but asked him to trust her, assuring him that she trusted him and asked that he trust her in return. Lionel agreed to act as the rear guard while Suki took the lead, with Mirialia and Misha following. They proceeded deeper into the ruins, and Lionel began to feel uneasy as the space grew strangely quiet. Suki confidently reassured everyone, but Mirialia, in the middle of the group, started to feel a rising sense of dread, wondering what kind of monster they would encounter. Just then, a large creature appeared from around a corner. Suki quickly raised her sword and struck, but it had no effect. They realized it was a puppet-like creature, almost like a robot, and it was advancing on Mirialia, who was frozen in fear. Suki quickly pulled the mage out of harm's way and leaped up, intending to smash the puppet. She struck its head, but her sword couldn't pierce it. And she realized it was a magical puppet. They would need greater power to defeat it. Meanwhile, Mirialia was still panicking after seeing Suki's failed attack, completely overwhelmed by fear. She lost focus on her comrades' voices and instinctively cast a spell called Magic Missile, which nearly hit Suki. Suki managed to dodge the attack, but the spell hit the puppet to no effect, leaving Mirialia to just stand there in terror. Sensing the battle was not going well, Lionel placed a reassuring hand on Mirialia's shoulder and told her the first thing they needed to do was stay calm. He then instructed Misha to cast a buffing spell, and with her power enhanced, Suki was finally able to slice the puppet in two. They celebrated their victory, but Mirialia burst into tears. They paused to let her catch her breath, and she explained to Lionel that when things didn't go according to the plan in her head, she felt lost and didn't know what to do. She wished she could be as calm as Suki or as observant as Misha. Lionel gently patted her head and reassured her that it was okay. A mage doesn't need to react as quickly as a swordsman. She needs to keep an eye on the flow of battle and know exactly which spell to use. Facing an unknown monster was the worst-case scenario for her, but Lionel told her she could rely on him until she felt more confident. His words lifted her spirits. Just then, Suki ran over, announcing that Misha was hungry. Lionel gave them the sandwiches he had prepared, which everyone found delicious. They teased him for being the team's ideal mom. With full stomachs and restored morale, they continued their mission. A little later, they faced another magical puppet, but this time, Mirialia calmly imbued Suki's sword with magic, and they defeated it with ease. After the battle, Mirialia felt a little sad, thinking about the former inhabitants who once lived in these ruins. Lionel explained that thanks to the magical puppets, the ruins hadn't been overrun by monsters, helping them collect a small amount of treasure. Suki, on the other hand, wished the magic puppets were a little more unpredictable in battle to add some drama. Later, back home, Lionel distributed the clan's funds and gave the rest to the team members. With the next day being a day off, he advised them to relax but not to overspend. Suki wanted to go out, but Misha planned to visit the church, while Mirialia was going to the library. Mirialia looked at Lionel with hopeful eyes, and he understood that he would be going with her tomorrow. Suki was delighted, excited at the idea of having a date with him. The next day, Lionel and Suki took a stroll around the town square. She bought some meat and commented on the size of the houses. Lionel explained that only the wealthy could afford to live within the city's safe walls. However, she wondered if the houses were truly safe from rats, which led Lionel to suggest they get a cat to deal with the pesky rodents. They agreed to visit the cat shop, but on the way, Suki was distracted by the many sights of the city. That evening, they ended up at the Adventurers Guild canteen, where she teased Lionel for being too frugal, calling him a cheapskate mom. Lionel retorted that the food here was actually very good. While eating fish, Suki started to flirt with him a little, but their conversation was interrupted when Jennifer announced an urgent mission. Meanwhile, at a large castle, Luke was having a tense conversation with a high-ranking official. This person criticized Luke for a 3-day delay just because of some rain. The official remarked that adventurers could drink comfortably in the countryside thanks to the order established by the royal knights. He added that if they had acted sooner, they might have stopped the rebellion before it even started. He then declared he would never hire the Golden Silk clan again, and slammed the castle doors shut, leaving Luke frozen in anger. After returning to the clan house, Luke still couldn't contain his rage. Fina tried to comfort Luke, saying it was just bad luck, and he rested his head on her. Joshua, however, chimed in sarcastically, bitterly remarking that if their former vice captain were here, he would have surely done everything possible to mitigate the problem. Frustrated, he glared at Fina. However, Nicole calmly advised him not to get worked up. Surprised by her composure, Joshua asked why she was so calm, and Nicole revealed that she was leaving the Adventurers Guild because she had received a better offer elsewhere. She even invited Joshua to come with her. He thought for a moment, then decided to go with her. And they held hands, promising not to end up like their former leaders. A large convoy was moving down the road, carrying members of the Hope clan. Suki wondered if joining this fight was the right decision, as they were up against someone who had challenged the royal family. Lionel explained that this mission was to hunt down a group of rebels hiding in the mountains, meaning they would be fighting against people. Mirialia exclaimed that those rebels didn't deserve to be called human, even saying she needed to brainwash herself to be able to fight. A flashback showed Jennifer explaining that the enemy numbered less than 10, but they would mobilize about 50 adventurers and mercenaries to scour the mountain. Lionel wondered if a little-known clan like theirs would be allowed to participate, but Jennifer reassured him that their track record so far had earned them this opportunity. Lionel guessed that Jennifer had also deliberately put in a good word for them, which he suspected was thanks to the good deeds he had done in the past. He accepted the mission because the rebel group was small and they would be acting alongside 500 knights, so they wouldn't have to do much to still get a share of the credit. Even so, the large gathering of adventurers made Lionel feel that something was wrong, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Lionel told his 3 companions to prepare themselves mentally and to temporarily set aside their reason, otherwise they wouldn't be able to take a human life. Suki assured him not to worry, saying she would fight with fierce determination, though it was clear she was just putting on a brave face. Still, Lionel was pleased to see she remembered what he had taught her. Meanwhile, Merle slapped her own cheeks and declared that her mental self-control process was complete. Lionel looked at them with pride, happy to see how much they had grown. Misha, on the other hand, slept the entire way there. When they arrived and set up camp, Lionel asked if the priestess was okay with this mission. Misha replied that it was just like dealing with heretics. He reassured them, telling them to speak up if things became too difficult. A knight then called for everyone to be silent, announcing that General Kitos would be commanding the entire army. The general declared they would camp for the night and begin the mountain sweep at dawn. While Kitos was speaking, Lionel spotted a figure sneaking into the forest. He quickly deduced General Kitos's plan and whispered to his comrades to get the camp ready, as this would be the starting point for the mountain sweep. Inside the general's tent, a knight reported that everything was going according to plan, with only 90 minutes until dawn and preparations for the sortie were beginning. Suddenly, from outside, fire arrows rained down on the camp, targeting the main encampment and the logistics units. At that moment, the Hope clan was watching from a safe distance. Lionel explained that a surprise attack on the camp or the supply lines was the most effective tactic the rebels could use. Suki asked if there was a traitor, but Lionel replied that this was also part of General Kitos's plan. The army never intended to hunt in the mountains. The information about the hunt was just a deception to trick the rebels into launching a surprise attack on the camp. Searching the entire mountain would be too dangerous and leave them vulnerable to an ambush. So the general deliberately revealed his army's numbers. The adventurers weren't summoned for their strength, but simply to fill out the ranks. Misha was furious when she realized she was just bait, while Suki and Mirialia were in shock. Lionel then said he had a plan for them to seize the glory for themselves and asked if they would follow him. At the camp, explosions rang out as warriors fought. The knights determined to take as many of the crown's enemies with them as they could. Seeing this, Kiros drew his sword and leaped into the fray, quickly cutting one rebel in half and knocking another to the ground. He then ordered his soldiers to surround the enemy. However, another rebel got back up and charged at the general. Before he could reach his target, the rebel was sent flying by magic. Kaitos turned to see the members of the Hope clan ready to assist. Suki and Lionel charged into battle, their swords piercing through the enemy's armor, earning the admiration of the knights. However, Lionel humbly explained that the secret was in his sword, which was blessed by Misha's divine power, while Suki's was imbued with Mirialia's magic. Even so, Lionel was struck by an arrow in the shoulder. But he wasn't worried, as a healing spell arrived just in time, followed by several magic missiles aimed at the enemy. With magical support from a distance, the two warriors could fight without any worries. Even the general was impressed. He thanked Lionel for saving his life and said he would never forget this debt. Lionel felt honored by the praise. The rest of the battle went smoothly, and the remaining rebels were captured. After the battle, the members of Hope clan knelt before the general. He asked for Lionel's name, then praised him for his outstanding performance in the battle, saying that such talent shouldn't be wasted, and invited him to join the army. Lionel recalled how as a child, he dreamed of becoming a knight and read about their adventures. But now, he had changed. He had willingly become a guide for the girls. He said he was honored by the invitation, but couldn't serve anyone until his 3 companions were his equals. The general simply smiled at his answer. And Lionel felt relieved, realizing his refusal wasn't a big deal. Kaitos told the 3 girls to rejoice for having such a wonderful mentor. Back at the Adventurers Guild, Jennifer informed Hope clan that a letter of commendation from General Kitos had arrived, which was an extra reward on top of all the others they had received. The receptionist noted that a letter of commendation addressed directly to Lionel was a rare thing. He held the sealed envelope in his hands and realized it was an official document that would go down in the history books. The 3 girls also received gifts. Suki was given an enchanted sword. Misha received an amulet imbued with defensive magic, and Mirialia got a strength-enhancing necklace. They named their new gifts and celebrated together, while Lionel watched and thought that if they sold these gifts, they could move to a better place. However, his companions immediately objected to the idea. As he tried to reason that their shabby house wasn't suitable for them, someone else entered the guild. Lionel looked toward the door and saw his old captain, Luke. His former boss approached, then knelt down, asking Lionel to return to the Golden Silk clan. Lionel realized that in the past 5 years, nothing had changed. The first time Luke knelt, Lionel worried he would make the same old mistake. But he had gone back because he wanted to believe in Luke, as if he were family. Lionel wondered if he had been a fool for believing in Luke. He looked at Luke and said if he needed money, he could use the savings Lionel had left behind. He added that he would never come back. Luke clutched his head and yelled that Lionel was his best friend. Like family. Lionel just looked at him coldly and asked how Joshua and the others were. He guessed they had already left, leaving only Luke and his beloved vice captain. Luke stood up in a rage, his hand on the hilt of his sword. However, the 3 girls of Hope clan stood between Lionel and Luke, saying they wouldn't show any mercy if he drew his sword. With a brave expression, Suki stood in front of Luke to protect Lionel, realizing he had completely lost his composure. Luke had no choice but to lower his sword and leave the guild. Lionel glanced at him before comforting a worried Suki, telling her she hadn't overstepped her bounds, but had actually helped him. Suki wanted to ask more about Luke, but Misha stopped her, saying it was best not to interfere. Misha added that Lionel would share when he was ready, and that Hope clan would always be their sanctuary. Suki agreed, and the 3 girls chatted happily together. Meanwhile, Luke was struggling, discussing the possibility of selling their belongings with Joshua and Nicole. The 2 objected, insisting they should try to get Lionel back. However, Luke remained firm, believing they could survive by selling their things as he watched the clan fall apart. Fina wasted no time in leaving the group to save herself. Afterward, Luke was left all alone as their assets were seized, with nothing left. He wandered aimlessly through the streets. Just then, he saw Fina laughing happily with another man. Feeling betrayed and enraged, he drew his sword and slashed Fina's arm. At a nearby tavern, people were gossiping about the fall of the Golden Silk clan, talking about how the once glorious group had now become a nightmare. They speculated about the former captain's potential capture and the punishment he would face for his crimes. The scene shifts to Luke in a cramped prison cell. Although he escaped the death penalty, he was sentenced to hard labor because Fina had somehow survived his attack. Meanwhile, at the Hope clan's house, Lionel was playing with the clan's cat. Mirialia, the Lion Queen, told him to go out and have some fun, since he was getting in the way of her cleaning. Lionel replied that he didn't have any money to spend on fun, and suddenly noticed a letter on the ground. Mirialia was about to pick up the letter, but Lionel quickly snatched it and hid it, making her even more suspicious. She teased him, guessing that he was using his money to build a private house and hiding love letters. Trying to escape her prying eyes, Lionel left the clan house and headed to the guild. Feeling down, he tried to trick Jennifer into buying him a drink, claiming he was thirsty. Jennifer saw right through him, telling him there was no reason to mooch off her when there was a fountain in the training yard. Feeling exposed, he asked why everyone had been so cold to him lately. Jennifer explained that everyone just wanted to be independent and not be a burden to him. She advised him to have a drink to wash away his worries. As Lionel quenched his thirst at the training yard, he was surprised to see Suki practicing her swordsmanship. He watched, impressed by how much stronger she had gotten in the past 3 months. When she realized someone was watching, Suki got distracted and was defeated by her sparring partner. Lionel reminded Suki to take a break and not to overdo it, worried she might get hurt. Suki agreed and teased him, calling him Mama Nell for being such a nag. Just then, Jennifer appeared with a teasing smile and announced she had a quest for him. She announced that it was a protection quest from the capital. A merchant had requested an escort from the guild. Lionel remarked that he was already planning to take a quest from the capital, so this was a good opportunity. Jennifer agreed, adding that the client requested an all-female party, making the Hope clan a perfect fit. She explained that the client was a woman, and being escorted by an all-male group would be stressful for her. The Hope clan accepted the quest, and 3 days later, they met their client, Anita, the head of the merchant caravan. They were surprised to find that her entire crew was made up of men. Just then, Misha had a divine premonition and informed Lionel that she, being blessed by the Supreme Being, sensed that this caravan was hiding some very bad people. Lionel found the situation truly suspicious, but he said they needed proof to confirm if Anita needed help. For now, they had to pretend they didn't notice anything. He informed Mirialia and Suki, who were terrible liars, and began to suspect that Anita might be a decoy to lure in new targets. As the group continued with the escort mission, Lionel discussed the route, explaining that since the main road was still damaged from a recent storm, they would have to take a detour. However, since this detour bypassed many places, they would have to camp out. A member of the caravan told Lionel he didn't need to be so strict and uptight. Lionel retorted that they needed to take proper precautions since they were rookie adventurers. The caravan member praised him for his seriousness and remarked that he was completely different from their commander, Anita, who was rather shy but always had a friendly smile. One of the men in the caravan told Lionel that if they were tired, they could rest. However, Lionel and his team already knew that these men were planning to ambush them and had likely committed similar sinful acts many times before, targeting female adventurers. Lionel predicted that the next few days would be very difficult, and he was counting on Misha's abilities to help them. Without a doubt, he suspected the first target would be her, so they had to remain vigilant. As night fell, a member of the caravan reported that the tents were set up and suggested that Lionel let Anita prepare dinner, as she was a talented cook. Anita, seemingly left with no other choice, forced a smile and told Lionel to let her handle dinner. The Hope clan was amazed by the meal Anita prepared, As she humbly asked them to forgive the simple meal she was able to make, the entire clan immediately dug into the meal before them. While Anita watched with a look full of pity, everyone was still eating when suddenly Lionel felt a strange sensation in his body, then dropped his food, clutching his chest. Lionel collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Suki screamed for help, but the entire caravan began to laugh at them, calling them fools, especially Lionel for not noticing the poison in his food. They tried to tie Lionel up but were shocked when he actually woke up and attacked them back. With this, the Hope clan subdued the caravan. While Lionel was helping his team, he didn't notice a man about to attack him. Just then, Anita sprang into action and saved him. In a flashback, we see Anita preparing dinner for the group. Lionel snuck up behind her and offered to help, saying he usually prepared the meals and doing nothing would make him feel restless. Anita refused and tried to convince him to rest. But Lionel then revealed that he already knew her plan to put poison in the food. Anita broke down, apologizing for trying to harm them and explaining that she was being controlled by the merchants, unable to defy them. Lionel comforted her, assuring her that he already had a plan. In the present, the merchants were furious, unable to believe that Anita could have tricked them. They angrily berated Lionel for working with Anita, threatening to ruin his clan's reputation. Unfazed, Lionel retorted that he could destroy them, pointing out that they had harmed countless adventurers. He warned that if any of their victims spoke up, the Adventurers Guild would surely not let these merchants get away with it. With that, he decided to take these corrupt merchants to the capital. This made the three girls extremely excited. Later, in the capital city of Garangran, the Hope clan was warmly welcomed by the soldiers. Lionel stepped forward, introducing himself as the clan leader, and presented the merchants to the authorities. The soldiers praised their efforts and asked them to meet the head of defense, who had questions for them. With that, Lionel took the lead, driving the carriage into the capital. As they entered the city, a crowd applauded them, leaving the group completely surprised and thrilled. Lionel watched as the girls basked in the admiration and support, continuing to drive the carriage without anyone noticing his presence, which left him rather disappointed. A few days later, Lionel met with General Kairos, who roared with laughter at his story of being overshadowed by the girls during the unexpected parade. Lionel tried to ignore the general's teasing and asked for a favor. When the general agreed to hear his request, Lionel recounted the incident involving Anita, which Kairos likely already knew about due to recent news. He explained that Anita was suffering from unfair criticism and blame from the public, even though the Adventurers Guild had already captured the real criminals behind the attacks on female adventurers. Lionel humbly asked for Kairos' help in supporting Anita. Kairos laughed at Lionel's serious expression, saying it was an easy request for him and that he would gladly help, though he might have to call in a favor someday. Lionel thanked him, replying that he would look forward to repaying the favor with a little interest, adding a smile. The general guessed that Lionel's resources must be running low if he had to ask for help. Lionel brushed off the comment and took a sip of his tea. The general refilled his cup, suggesting they continue their conversation, this time about the former leader of the Golden Silk Butterfly. Meanwhile, in a prison cell, Luke sat in silence as a soldier came to inform him that he would be meeting a nobleman who would pardon and release him from prison. He was given half an hour to prepare for the meeting, and once again, he was left alone. Luke cleaned himself up, preparing to meet the nobleman. As he shaved, he recalled Lionel's words of encouragement. In his moment of doubt, he smiled to himself, surprised that even in this situation, he still remembered Lionel's words. At the reception area, Luke met Kairos, who informed him that his pardon had been approved by King Morrison. Luke bowed his head in thanks at the mention of the king's name. He wondered why Kairos was helping him, and ventured to ask if someone had requested the pardon on his behalf. Kairos replied that he himself had proposed it to the king. Luke thought to himself, though he didn't say it out loud, that he knew for sure someone else had sent the general to help him. With that person in mind, Luke scoffed contemptuously, thinking of Lionel. He remembered how Lionel had pushed him away when the Golden Silk Butterfly needed him most, and now his old friend wanted to show him pity. Tightly clenching his fist in anger, he accepted Kairos' financial aid, which he suspected came from Lionel. believing his old friend was mocking him. Later, Kaidos met with Lionel again and told him about the sharp, hateful glare Luke had given him. Kaidos warned Lionel that his old friend might be targeting him and suggested that if he were in Lionel's shoes, he would cut all ties with Luke to avoid future danger. However, Lionel paid little mind to Kaidos' advice and expressed his deep gratitude for his help. Kaidos was surprised and called Lionel a rather strange man. He then asked about Anita, curious if Lionel planned to recruit her into his clan. Though it was difficult to say, Lionel admitted he didn't have enough money to hire Anita. Kaidos found this amusing, remarking that a brilliant strategist like Lionel was now broke. He even suggested that Lionel could become a knight if he wanted to. However, Lionel refused, saying he couldn't abandon the girls. He was their leader and had to ensure they became successful adventurers who could stand on their own 2 feet. Seeing Lionel's predicament, the general offered to help. Lionel looked at the piece of paper Kaidos handed him, which detailed a job assigned to villa cleaning, with a reward twice that of a typical goblin hunting quest. Suki remarked that the general was very kind for helping them through a tough spot, while Murielio worried about having to repay him in the future. Suki replied that they should be grateful to the general, especially since he seemed to have taken a liking to Lionel. However, Lionel expressed concern that if Kaidos got caught up in any political conflict, they might get dragged into it as well. The group of girls pondered this, but Suki laughed and said Lionel was worrying too much. However, upon arriving at the villa, Suki couldn't help but curse the general when she saw the massive estate. The girls laughed and said that Suki should have expected a huge house for such a high reward. They started cleaning, but Lionel panicked when he saw the girls starting to take off their clothes to avoid getting their outfits dirty. He scolded them for not bringing a change of clothes, but the girls replied that they didn't have any other sets of clothes. Excited, they ran off to clean the villa, leaving Lionel flustered by the situation as the girls continued cleaning inside. He was busy trimming the tall grass, thinking about the wonderful unity and friendship of his family, hoping that it would always be this way. Looking at the vast garden, he thought to himself that it would be fun to swim in the lake. Just then, Suki poked her head out the window, agreeing with him and suggesting they do something fun for a bit, since cleaning the entire mansion would take quite a while. However, Lionel scolded them for working in such casual clothes. The girls joked that they wanted to put on swimsuits and relax, hoping Lionel would let them take a break. Lionel thought of another idea. Meanwhile, near the lake, some strange creatures began to appear. Lionel and the girls strolled through the market, looking for swimsuits and spare outfits. Suki complained about having to buy proper clothes when they were still in debt. Lionel promised that when they returned to the city, he would pay off their debts and stressed that the family should provide equipment for its adventurers, so they could reach their full strength and potential. A good weapon was essential, and they had to have a budget for that. The girls hugged Lionel, thanking him for everything he did for them, grateful that he always put their interests first. After shopping, they gathered firewood and collected food supplies, happily imagining the meat feast they were going to enjoy. On the way back, Lionel noticed something strange moving in the lake, but he paid it no mind and continued to follow the girls. Later, the Hope family finished their dinner when Suki noticed a commotion in the town. The whole team rushed to the window and were horrified to hear the townspeople screaming for help, shouting that Sahagin had appeared and were attacking. Sahagin are aquatic monsters that prey on humans. Hearing this, the entire family immediately prepared their weapons, ready to fight and protect the town from the monster attack. At the same time, in the town, the people panicked and cried for help as the Sahagin killed them one by one. A man was devoured by a monster right in front of a child, leaving the little girl utterly terrified. As the monster closed in on the little girl and was about to attack, Suki rushed in and killed it, saving the child from certain death. Proudly, Suki declared that she had killed a monster, but Lionel warned her to stay on guard, as the Sahagin were fierce and agile. Suki nodded and immediately rushed to attack another monster. However, Suki was surprised to see that her strike only left a shallow wound on the monster's thick hide. Enraged, the demon counterattacked with incredible speed and power, striking back at her. Seeing Suki was in trouble, Mirialia immediately intervened, destroying the monster with her magic. The militia arrived to support the Hope family, as the soldiers were busy fighting other Sahagin attacking the town. The group quickly devised a plan to trap and push back the monsters, coordinating with the militia to launch a synchronized attack. Lionel reminded the girls to stay on their guard, stressing that this enemy wouldn't scatter as easily as goblins. Suki confidently replied that she could handle the rest. The group continued to fight, pushing more Sahagin back into their territory. The militia executed the strategy, fighting with support from the Hope family. As dawn broke, all the monsters had been defeated, and the townspeople began to assess the damage they had caused. Meanwhile, Suki brought Lionel a cup of coffee, thanking him for his efforts during the battle. Lionel praised Suki for her success in defeating the Sahagin. Just then, the little girl Suki had saved approached with her parents, expressing their sincere gratitude for the warriors' help. The little girl gave Suki a flower as a thank you gift and wished her good luck. Meanwhile, Luke, filled with rage, raised his sword, ready to stab Fina for her betrayal. In her room, Fina woke up from a nightmare of Luke killing her. She cursed herself for being paralyzed by fear, when survival was the only option. But to her horror, she realized Luke wasn't a ghost. He appeared at the window, lowering himself gently from the ledge. He tossed her a bag of gold to help cover her expenses while she was injured. Fina refused his pity, seeing it as a sign that he would never stop haunting her. She taunted him, saying that if he truly killed her, he would become a traitor, abandoning his friends and killing his lover. Luke, enraged and pushed to his absolute limit, plunged his sword into Fina, ending her life. She embraced him one last time and said they would meet again in hell. With a twisted expression, Luke promised he would follow her there, but not right away. Not until he faced his best friend and repaid his kindness. At Kaidos' house, Lionel was stunned to learn that the mayor of the town they had just saved from monsters insisted on awarding them medals of honor for their heroic actions. The general added that they didn't need to continue with the cleanup, as it wouldn't be right for the town's heroes to do such work. Furthermore, there would be a banquet held in their honor. However, they all felt hesitant to attend. Remembering those who had been sacrificed in the battle, Meisha reminded them that despite the losses, they had saved thousands of lives and the people's livelihoods, and no one could criticize them for celebrating their victory. After some thought, the girls agreed to join the party. Lionel watched quietly, glad to see the girls' spirits were lifted. Later, Lionel changed into a sharp suit that highlighted his charm, and Kaidos complimented his appearance, stressing that Lionel deserved the town's gratitude for helping defeat the Sahagin, a feat that even the town's soldiers struggled to accomplish with minimal casualties. However, Lionel humbly deflected the praise, giving credit to the girls who had fought and defeated the enemy. Just then, the three girls entered, each dressed in their finest attire. Seeing their joy, Lionel couldn't help but feel emotional, as if he were introducing his own daughters to society. He only wished they could live more comfortably and enjoy their youth. The mayor soon approached Lionel and struck up a conversation. He expressed his admiration for Lionel's ability to lead a small team to success, while also acknowledging the efforts of the townspeople who rose up to protect their homes and the ones they loved. Lionel said he was willing to do whatever it took, and that while his strength lay in strategy, he used it to protect those who were important to him. The two older men praised him for being an excellent mentor to these outstanding girls, and realizing it was thanks to Lionel's guidance that they had grown so much. The mayor then noticed Lionel was drinking without eating and invited him to try the food. Lionel took a bite, savoring the flavor and pausing to admire the meal. However, Kaidos approached and broke his moment of relaxation with a serious expression. The general informed him that after the party, they needed to return because Fina had been killed. A look of dread washed over Lionel's face as he realized who was responsible for her death. He felt a pang of grief for his friend, who was now completely consumed by the darkness within him. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Luke was wreaking havoc with a crazed look on his face. He demanded to be made the leader of a group of bandits, but the bandits thought he was insane and ignored him. To prove he wasn't someone to be trifled with, Luke swung his sword and killed a member of the group, terrifying them. This brutal display forced the rest of the group to submit to him without resistance. A girl stood in the shadows, witnessing Luke's cruelty. Back at the guild, Jennifer thanked Lionel's group for helping capture the corrupt merchants, while admitting the guild's own shortcomings and oversight. As a token of her gratitude, she offered them an additional reward. Although Jennifer acted as if she knew nothing about the merchants' corruption, Lionel was certain she had known before assigning the mission. Cunning as she was, she must have sent Team Hope because she trusted they could handle the job. Lionel then asked Jennifer about Fina's recent murder and whether they had confirmed Luke was responsible. Jennifer sighed, explaining that they couldn't be sure as there was no physical evidence and no signs of a struggle on Fina's body. However, Jennifer had another lead. The most notorious criminal group in the city had recently changed leaders, and her gut told her it was Luke. Although she had no concrete proof, she trusted her instincts. Lionel dismissed this information for the time being, since it was unconfirmed, and left the guild. At the group's house, Lionel and the girls were surprised to find their pet cat, Lion King, had brought home a female cat friend. Lionel gave the male cat a displeased look, but the girls argued that maybe he was lonely in the house and had invited a friend over. The girls pleaded with Lionel, and he finally sighed and agreed to keep both cats. In return, he asked the girls to clean the house while he went out to take care of some business. Lionel then went to see the moneylender who had given the girls their loan. The imposing man directed him to a lady named Mary who had sponsored the loan. Lionel offered to pay off the debt so the girls would have more money for their needs. Impressed by Lionel's dedication, Mary praised him as a true leader who genuinely cared for his group members. Thinking of the girls, Lionel smiled, proud of their accomplishments. Lionel shared that the girls had also taught him a lot about life, and he was incredibly grateful to them. Pleased by his words, Mary found the IOU and tore it up in front of Lionel, saying she wanted to support the girls. She refused repayment, saying she had grown fond of them and felt sorry for them as orphans. Upon meeting Lionel, she realized how lucky they were to have someone like him who truly cared for them. With the debt settled, Lionel decided to stop by the Hunters Guild to check for available quests before heading home. On his way, he was accidentally bumped into by a girl who tried to snatch his pouch. However, Lionel was alert and quickly thwarted her plan, restraining her. Realizing the girl was just a kid, he let her go and even offered that if she needed help, she could find him at the Hunters Guild. The girl was surprised to discover that her own money pouch was missing. Lionel had stealthily taken it without her noticing. She rushed to the Hunters Guild to confront him about stealing her wallet. Lionel smirked, dangling the pouch in front of her, claiming he took it by accident, a sarcastic smile on his face, but he quickly turned serious, asking her directly what she wanted from him. Lionel deduced that this girl must have had a reason for approaching him, because if it wasn't important, she wouldn't have risked getting caught. The fact that she confidently walked into the Hunters Guild also showed that she knew who he was. The girl was surprised at how easily he figured out her intentions, admitting defeat and recognizing him as the city's most renowned strategist. Cornered, she apologized for their earlier encounter and introduced herself as Meg, a member of the city's notorious bandit gang. She was a member of the Hawkblade, a group often seen as a menace by society. She explained that despite their bad reputation, they did whatever it took to survive. Meg went on to explain that since no one was willing to help them, her group was forced to resort to dishonest means. However, she was now seeking Lionel's help, because the Hawkblade bandits had fallen into Luke's hands. This information left Lionel shocked and stunned. He was horrified to learn that Luke had become the leader of a bandit gang. Meg reported that the gang had fallen into chaos since Luke's arrival, and that many of her comrades had been killed by Luke himself. She had been lucky to escape, and was now begging for Lionel's help, believing he was the only one who could stop Luke, since he knew him better than anyone else. Lionel agreed, but he didn't feel he had the right to interfere in a war between gangs. He was worried that Luke's reputation as a former hero explorer would only make things more complicated if he didn't act immediately. Lionel went to Jennifer for advice. She quickly pulled a piece of paper from her drawer and hastily wrote out a new mission for him: to hunt down the man who killed her comrade, Fina. She stamped the paper with the Adventurers Guild's official seal and handed it to Lionel, asking if he would accept the mission. Jennifer added that they knew the culprit was caught up in a turf war between gangs, and that he was the former leader of the Golden Silk Butterfly. Lionel pretended it was just a game of fate and asked Meg for information. Meg smiled, teasing him, and declared that her information came at a pretty high price. The great strategist replied that he promised to restore her gang to its former glory. That evening, Lionel sat outside the clan house, sipping a drink and thinking deeply about his worries. He thought about how he'd acted like a brave hero accepting the mission. But deep down, the only thing he wanted was to have those good old days with his best friend back. He remembered when he broke Luke out of prison. He thought they would live a happy life as farmers, far away from any adventures. Now, Lionel felt foolish for not realizing just how strong Luke's resentment was, which ultimately turned him into a monster. He wondered if he had been wrong to ask Kaidos for Luke's forgiveness. Lionel believed that if Luke continued to rise in the underworld, a confrontation between him and the Adventurers Guild would be inevitable. He imagined the city of Gyria falling to ruin. And even though he didn't care about the balance of power between the factions, it saddened him. Because a civil war would only create more orphans, just like him and Suki. Lionel looked up at the night sky, remembering the Luke who used to care about the orphans caught in conflicts. When he closed his eyes, he saw an image of himself and Luke as children, innocent and happy together. He recalled a day at the orphanage when Luke punched him in the face. As Lionel fell to the ground, Luke told him he'd always hated him for butting into everything and stealing the spotlight. Suddenly, Luke tripped and fell flat on his face. He hadn't realized that Lionel had tied his shoelaces together. The tables had turned. Now Lionel was the one left standing. He told Luke he was an idiot for only paying attention to his own insults and not noticing what was happening. Lionel reminded him that he was older than Luke, so their argument became about who should listen to whom. An orphanage worker saw them fighting and punished them by denying them dinner that night. That night, Luke lay in bed, unable to sleep from hunger, and blamed Lionel for it. Lionel came over and offered him a piece of bread he'd gotten from the canteen. Luke asked why Lionel was sharing when he could have eaten the whole thing himself. Lionel replied that he'd feel bad if Luke collapsed just because he didn't give him any food. Luke complimented Lionel, saying he always knew the right thing to say, and Lionel complimented Luke back for always being the one to comfort the other kids when they cried. Luke admitted that he just wanted to help people who were in trouble. Luke's eyes shone with a fierce determination to achieve his dream, and he promised that one day he'd be strong enough to help all the children in the world. Back in the present, Lionel stared at his reflection in his sword's blade. He told himself he needed to stop living in the past. Instead, he pictured the monster Luke had become and prepared himself to be the one responsible for taking him down. He wondered if he was strong enough to win in a fight to the death. Since they were both swordsmen, he knew Luke had the advantage in strength and speed, while he possessed foresight and superior tactics. Lionel recalled their frequent scuffles as kids and compared them to a bloody death match between adults who now had responsibilities. Suki and the others saw him looking sad from a window above. Suki jumped out of the window. Lionel caught Suki as she jumped down and held her in his arms. She told him that daughters can't just sit idly by while their mother is suffering. She demanded that he share his problems with them so they could help as a team. Her face was stained with tears, full of pain and anger that Lionel wouldn't share his sorrow with them. Lionel apologized, and the girls were overjoyed that he was finally ready to tell them about his problem. Lionel recounted the story to the girls, and they were angry that he had hidden such an important matter. Lionel explained that it was a personal matter, and he didn't want to get the girls involved. The girls replied that they would gladly help him because they were a team. Lionel realized they had used his own words against him, so he could no longer make any excuses. Suki asked what his plan was to find the hideout of Luke's bandit gang. The next morning, Lionel introduced the girls to Meg. The girls were happy to meet a new friend. and they all excitedly introduced themselves to the thief. Meg told the group that Luke's hideout was deep in the slums. She warned that they needed to be careful entering the slums, which were crawling with enemies and assassins. However, despite the warning, the girls remained cheerful, as if they were preparing for a picnic. Meg remarked on how strange they were. Instead of being worried, they were laughing and thought the name Hope really suited them. That evening, the group arrived at an abandoned mansion. Meg told them that this was once the mansion of a noble family, before the area became a slum. Lionel checked on the girls and saw that they were all prepared for what was about to happen inside the house. He kicked the front door open and stepped inside. A figure stood in the darkness within. Lionel walked in and sarcastically greeted Luke, asking if the master of the house could come in. Luke responded calmly, saying that he could indeed enter. Lionel ordered his group to be on guard for danger, but Luke told them not to worry, as there was no one else in the mansion but him. Instantly, Lionel drew his sword and let the scabbard fall to the floor, signaling that he was ready to end things between them once and for all. Isuki handed Lionel a sword and said she would hold on to the scabbard. Lionel looked at the blade in his hand, remembering that it was an extension of his own life. He looked at the girls, saw them holding the scabbard safely in their hands, and told himself that the scabbard is where life returns, promising he would go there, as if he knew the girls were where he belonged. Both men prepared to fight. Lionel glanced at Luke's scabbard on the ground, disappointed to see he had thrown away his home. Both stepped forward, preparing to strike the first blow. When their swords clashed, the force of the impact lit up the dark room. Both fell back to regain their balance. Luke asked his opponent why he was so surprised when he entered. Lionel replied that he hadn't expected there to be no one else here, since according to rumors, Luke had taken over a gang. Luke admitted that he had initially taken leadership, but then all the members left. He had intentionally broken the Thieves Guild's rules, all to create a plan that would force the guild to call on Lionel for help. Lionel praised him for setting the perfect stage for their dramatic duel. Luke felt honored to be praised by such a brilliant strategist. Their swords clashed again, locking them in a stalemate. Lionel pressed the attack, asking if Luke's entire plan was just to watch him plunder. Luke dodged the blow and replied that he did it because he still considered Lionel a friend. Their swords continued to clash. Finally, Lionel's arm was grazed. Despite dodging the blow, Lionel counterattacked, his blade grazing Luke's cheek. Lionel remembered when he and Luke were only 10 years old. Having just received their blessings in the church, Luke praised Lionel for receiving the strategist's skill, saying it suited him perfectly. Luke revealed that he had also been blessed to become a hero, which made Lionel curious. Luke declared that he wanted to become an adventurer, then held out his hand with a smile, hoping Lionel would always be by his side. They shook hands, determined to conquer the world together. Back in the present, they were hurting each other with the blades in their hands. Lionel saw an opening and prepared a fatal blow. However, Luke just smiled confidently. Suddenly, he struck his opponent's stomach with his knee. The blow was so powerful that Lionel coughed up blood and collapsed. As Lionel was on the ground, Luke swung again. Lionel dodged and reached for his sword on the ground. Luke said that, as a strategist, Lionel surely knew that he wasn't using tricks, but simply showing no mercy. Lionel struggled back to his feet, saying nothing, just smiling at his own unwavering logic. Still kneeling, Lionel replied that he wouldn't comment on what Luke had just done, laughing as he knew he was no better. Suddenly, Misha cast a healing spell, and Mirialia used an enhancement spell. With their power, Lionel was fully healed, and in his hand was a sword glowing with new strength. Luke, enraged, complained that this wasn't a 3-on-1 fight, but it turned out Suki was already behind Luke, ready to strike. In midair, she corrected him. Actually, it's 4 against 1. Luke blocked the attack, but as he stepped back, he came face to face with a Lionel who was ready to strike. Luke barely managed to block it, but was still pushed back by the force. Luke looked towards the Hope Clan team, who were all teaming up against him. A flashback appeared in his mind of that night, when they decided to team up to find Luke. Suki had asked Lionel if they could fight together in a match. They all agreed that it would be fine if they all joined in to deal with Luke, but they would maintain the feel of a one-on-one duel to surprise their enemy. Back in the present, Luke was overwhelmed, facing Lionel and Suki at the same time from two sides. And all he could do was dodge. He saw the main door and rushed outside. Mirialia fired a magic bullet, hitting his left knee and injuring him, slowing his escape just enough for Suki to catch up and slash his sword hand. Luke felt a sense of familiarity in the air. Lionel rushed in from the front and plunged his sword into his chest. At that moment, Luke realized he was in the same scene he had created for Fina, but this time, it was him. As his strength faded, Luke looked at Lionel and said, "We were supposed to conquer the world together." Lionel asked Luke what he would have carved on his tombstone. Luke replied that he didn't need anything. Not even a grave. He fell to the ground, his eyes wide and lifeless. Lionel reached down and closed his eyes, letting him rest in peace. He stood over the body of his old friend, looking up at the moon, saddened that their friendship had ended this way. He wondered if there was anything he could have done to stop it all. Suki hugged him, saying she would always be by his side. Mirialia hugged him from behind, saying she was with him too. Misha walked over, also saying she would always be with him. Meg watched from a distance, feeling awkward, but also said she would be with him. The girls looked at Meg, teasing that she wasn't part of the moment. Then they all shared a cheerful laugh with Meg. Lionel looked at the laughing girls, his heart warmed by the sight. They planned to head back to let the church and the guild handle the aftermath. They returned to the Adventurers Guild, where Jennifer congratulated them on brilliantly completing the quest. When she saw Meg was still with them, she shyly admitted that she had been kicked out of the Bandit Guild. They asked her how that could be, since she was instrumental in taking down Luke. Meg explains that the Bandit Guild was offended because she went to the Adventurers Guild to sort things out for them. Lionel realizes that the Bandit Guild secretly rewarded her, setting her free from a life of crime. Meg thinks about her new opportunity and asks if she can join them. She asks if they have any problem with her request. But before they can answer, Lionel asks her what skill she was blessed with. Meg doesn't understand what a blessing is, which surprises the whole group. Suki tries to explain blessings to Meg, but no matter what kind of sound effects or weird gestures she makes, Meg still doesn't get it. Lionel then explains that a talent, or blessing, is a divine revelation a child receives when they turn 10, during a blessing ceremony. After that, the person chooses a profession. For example, Lionel says his talent is strategist, while his profession is swordsman. Finally, Meg understands. She feels sad for not knowing something that is just common knowledge to them. It makes her feel like she's wasted her life, an orphan who was exploited by the Bandit Guild. The three girls feel sympathy for her, crying for her, and hugging her all at once. While comforting Meg, the group tells her they hope she can reclaim her life from now on. Meg is so surprised by this warmth that she feels trapped in their tight embrace. Afterward, they take Meg to the church in town. The priest informs Lionel that there are many children out there just like Meg, who have never received a blessing. The priest turns to Meg and says he will help her prepare for the blessing ceremony. Meg shyly mentions that she doesn't know any rituals or prayers. Misha comforts Meg, saying she'll guide her when it's time to pray. Suki also reassures Meg that she'll help out during the process. Suki bursts out laughing as she recalls Misha's blessing ceremony and how she was so nervous she moved her right hand and right foot at the same time. Misha blushes in embarrassment, repeatedly denying what Suki brought up. Meg smiles brightly along with the girls, and Lionel can't help but feel happy seeing Meg so joyful. They enter the ceremonial hall, where Meg, wearing a ceremonial veil on her head, prays together with Misha. Then, the priest leads Meg to the front of the hall. She kneels in prayer, while the priest stands before her, reciting a religious oath. Suddenly, a brilliant pillar of light shines down from above, enveloping Meg. In this sacred moment, Meg feels a divine presence. With tears falling down her cheeks, she confesses that for the first time in her life, she has just heard the voice of a god. Later, at the Adventurers Guild, Meg excitedly tells the group she's been blessed with the skill agility. However, she has no idea what it actually means. Lionel explains that it's a talent specializing in speed. Jennifer hands Meg a registration form for the scout position and asks her to fill it out. Meg admits in embarrassment that she doesn't know how to read or write. Lionel helps her complete the form and confirms that all the information he wrote down is correct. Meg gets excited when she sees Lionel write that she's a member of Hope. She apologizes for having to ask him to write for her. Lionel replies seriously that she doesn't need to worry about it. With a somber expression, he admits he's furious with the Bandit Guild for exploiting orphans without teaching them any life skills. Mirialia says cheerfully that their mom is still the kind of man who gets angry for the sake of others. She goes on to list his good qualities, like his unwavering loyalty, his gentle soul, and many more. This gets the other girls to join in, competing to list Lionel's countless good qualities. Even Jennifer chimes in, saying he's always precise on every mission and has a sharp mind. All the girls tell Lionel in unison that he's a wonderful man. Lionel gets so embarrassed that he runs for the door. A moment later, he comes back and changes the subject by reminding everyone to prepare ingredients for Meg's welcome party later. He's so flustered that Jennifer can't help but burst out laughing. That evening, at home, the Hope family raises their mugs of ale in celebration. The feast looks so delicious that Meg can only stare and gulp. While the other girls are busy stuffing their faces, meanwhile, Meg talks to Lionel, asking about her role in the group. Lionel thinks for a moment, then assigns her to scouting duty. He explains that his job is to find lucrative jobs to raise the group's reputation in town. The girl was delighted to hear that and promised to help the team land some big contracts. Meanwhile, deep beneath the labyrinth, a monstrous beast with the body of an elephant but possessing 3 heads, a lion, a dragon, and a goat, was attacking a group of adventurers. The group was forced to retreat, knowing they were no match for the fearsome creature known as the Chimera. At the Adventurers Guild, Lionel and Meg were looking at the quest board, but both were disappointed to find very few jobs available that suited them. Jennifer explained that there was a reason for the small number of quests. She then praised Meg for doing a great job honing her information-gathering skills today. Meg was both embarrassed and delighted by the compliment, but then she and Lionel suddenly grew panicked, realizing Jennifer was just buttering them up before giving them a terrifying mission. Jennifer sadly admitted they had guessed correctly. She reported that a chimera had taken over the Labyrinth. Not only that, but the elite guild team assigned to explore the lower levels was now trapped, with the monster blocking their way up. They discussed the chimera. Its goat head could cast spells, its lion head had the power to crush boulders, its dragon head breathed fire, and its snake tail carried a deadly venom. Lionel signed up the Hope clan for the mission as if the monster was nothing to him. Meg, trembling in fear, yelled at him for making such a quick decision for the whole group. Lionel explained that someone needed to act fast, as it had been half a month since the guild team below had lost contact with the outside world, and they were likely exhausted. Even though he wasn't a champion of justice, he trusted Jennifer's judgment that they could complete the mission. Lionel also explained to Meg that he had faith in his 4 companions. Meg blushed, feeling as if he didn't trust her. Jennifer teased that Lionel had a knack for making girls swoon without even realizing it. Lionel watched them whisper to each other, not understanding what they were talking about. At the Labyrinth, the Hope team was exploring the dungeons. Meg spotted 2 poisoned rats up ahead, so she rolled poison orbs near them to further poison them while they were weakened. Lionel ordered Mirialia to unleash magic bullets at the rats. She complied, finishing them off completely. Once the monsters were down, Lionel and Suki rushed in to deliver the final blows. After clearing the threat, the group moved forward, picking up magic stones as big as baseballs from the corpses of the defeated monsters. Lionel recalled entering this labyrinth once before when he was with the Silk Butterfly team, but back then, the monsters weren't nearly as numerous. Meg held the magic stone in her hand, unable to believe she could turn it into money, since she'd always had to steal to get by before. Suki was excited for Meg and encouraged her to keep trying. She raised her sword and told Meg that one day she'd have one just like it when she made a name for herself. Suki proudly showed off that her sword was a reward from General Kaidos after she took down a group of rebels. Meg was so thrilled her eyes sparkled. From his familiarity with the area, Lionel knew they were close to the Great Door. His group guessed that the reason there were so many monsters was that the Chimera had driven many of them up to the higher floors. As they approached the door, a sense of dread washed over them, and before opening it, Lionel laid out the battle plan. He and Suki would lead the charge. When the Chimera was distracted, Mirialia would use her magic to destroy the lion head. While it was reeling in pain, Meg would blind its 3 heads, and in that moment, they would end the fight. When they opened the door, everyone's hair stood on end as the Chimera was already there, staring at them and preparing to attack. Lionel and Suki charged in first. They dodged the dragon head's fiery breath and split up. Suki attacked the monster's left side while Lionel took the right, while the Chimera was busy chasing them. Mirialia began casting her spell, using blades of ice to sever the lion head in the middle. As the Chimera writhed in agony, Meg threw daggers at its remaining eyes, each one hitting its mark with precision. In the final moment, Misha chanted a spell to create chains of light, which wrapped tightly around the Chimera, rendering it immobile. With it restrained, Suki rushed in for an attack, the force of her blow heavily wounding the beast. However, this also left her wide open, and the Chimera's snake tail prepared to strike her with its deadly venom. Before it could get close, Lionel rushed in, slicing off the snake's head. Meanwhile, the magic chains were slowly breaking, as Meisha could no longer maintain the spell. Mirialia summoned ice lances, and the sharp spears shot up from beneath the monster's body, impaling it and forcing the Chimera to leap into the air. The monster was hit by a barrage of ice. The dragon head prepared to breathe fire just as the Chimera landed on the ground. They had arrived in the nick of time. Meg threw a knife at the dragon head's snout, forcing its mouth shut. The energy inside its mouth swelled until it exploded from within. Lionel and Suki immediately launched a fierce assault, attacking the monster from multiple directions. Its giant hand clawed at Suki's knee, and she was healed by Misha's magic. At the same time, Lionel was also wounded by the monster's claws. Mirialia summoned magic bullets to attack the monster. While she endured the pain, Lionel and Suki continued their assault. Finally, the monster fell, smoke rising from its heavy impact with the ground. They were all exhausted, but at the same time, relieved. Meanwhile, Meg was busy harvesting the Chimera's parts, eagerly searching for the rare magic stone. She was disappointed to find the stone was only the size of a baseball, just like those from smaller monsters. She cried in frustration, and the other girls comforted her. They went down, rescued the trapped adventurers, and brought them to the surface. They were surprised to find the entrance to the labyrinth crowded with people waiting for the rescued. One of them was an old friend of Lionel's. Lionel introduced him to the girls as Rhinos, the leader of the hard-boiled gang. The man was overjoyed to see Lionel again and said he wanted to do something to thank him for saving the trapped adventurers. Lionel asked him for a supply of wood, as he was planning to build a changing room. In his mind, this would be a huge relief, since the girls were always casually walking around without paying attention to how they were dressed in front of him. Rhinos sympathized with him over this predicament. No one knew that high above, a demonic eye was watching them. Elsewhere, a demonic humanoid creature was watching them through a crystal ball. This man with horns on his head was frustrated that the Hope Party had ruined his plans to reclaim his people's ancestral lands. Lionel was sleeping when he suddenly heard someone call his name. He opened his eyes to see Suki, Mirialia, and Misha standing over him to wake him up, wearing very little. He screamed in panic at the sight, demanding to know why they were so scantily dressed. A few days earlier, Lionel had shown Rhinos that he had finished building the changing room, and had also made an extra bed for Meg and a tower for their pet cat. He informed the girls that they now had a changing room. However, the girls seemed more annoyed than happy. Back in the present, the girls were extremely cheerful, standing naked in front of Lionel. Lionel immediately opened the wardrobe and quickly dressed the girls. Meg witnessed the scene and told Lionel she wouldn't judge him for his strange hobby. Lionel couldn't take it anymore, so he left breakfast for the girls and got ready to head out to the Adventurers Guild. Before leaving, he ordered them to eat the stew he had prepared for lunch. This made the girls think that he was truly their mom. The culprit left a farewell letter before taking their own life, but the orb's hiding place remains a mystery. She worried that if their numbers continued to grow, they would soon attack the town in search of food. This made Lionel think of the Chimera and its unusual appearance. He also noticed that the other monsters in the labyrinth were unusually strong. He feared these were bad signs, indicating that the Demon King might be preparing to make a move. Lionel recalled the Great War between humans and demons 500 years ago, and worried that this conflict might be about to repeat itself. Jennifer asked Lionel to investigate and pointed to a map to indicate his next destination, the ruins of Piran, which was also the home of the demon tribe 500 years ago. The place is now dilapidated and forgotten. Jennifer reminded him that although their theory was just a hunch for now, her woman's intuition told her they were on the right track. Lionel pondered Jennifer's reasoning, but he believed that what she called woman's intuition was actually a talent she was blessed with. She officially confirmed the mission by requesting that Clan Hope investigate the increase in monsters at the ruins of Piran. Meanwhile, in the night sky, a shooting star was falling. In a dark castle, an old woman with elvish ears told her mysterious master that the appearance of the falling star was a good omen for the monsters, but also a harbinger of humanity's doom. The mysterious master agreed and declared that it was indeed a good omen for the monster race. The old woman addressed the master as Your Majesty, the Demon King Ingril. Elsewhere in the demon lands, a sorcerer was summoning an army of the undead. The one responsible was none other than the monster who had been watching Clan Hope in the Labyrinth. He laughed smugly, confident that his plan would not fail this time. He revealed his final summon, a skeleton in a royal robe, called the Mighty Undying Leech King. At Clan Hope's headquarters, the group was gathered around a table studying a map. They calculated that it would take 12 days on foot to reach the abandoned Piran castle. They noted that it was located right on the border of the Masu Kingdom, the nation of the monster race, which further strengthened their suspicion that the Demon King's army was on the move. However, Lionel speculated that there might be leftover magical relics in the ruined castle, leading to the increase and strengthening of the monsters, and that the monster race might have nothing to do with it. Regardless, they would find out the real reason once they investigated. They began their journey, and things were quite peaceful. They bonded over nights by the campfire, occasionally enjoying delicious meals. One evening, while the group was sleeping at an inn, Lionel heard a strange sound. He immediately drew his sword and shot up from his bed. It turned out to be Meg, who had come into his room to say she felt uneasy, as if they were being watched. He asked her to check the window, but the fog was too thick for her to see anything. He then told her to wake the other members, prepare for battle, and gather in his room. Lionel had deduced from the strange fog that they were facing a leech. He patted Meg on the head, saying that thanks to her, they wouldn't be caught by surprise. The praise made her blush with happiness and appreciation, and she hurried out of the room to warn the others. Meanwhile, Lionel approached the window, thinking that their first concern would be the zombie soldiers. Fortunately, the undead weren't smart enough to open doors or break windows, so the guests in the inn would surely be safe. The black fog slowly began to dissipate, revealing hordes of undead monsters advancing toward them. However, Clan Hope was now ready and armed, waiting in front of the inn. Meg sensed that the zombies didn't carry a feeling of anger, but rather one of jealousy toward the living. Suki was eager to charge into battle, but Lionel ordered her to wait. Mirialia would be the one to attack first from a distance. She chanted a spell and summoned spears of fire, aiming at multiple targets and setting the zombies ablaze. Meg contributed by throwing a bowl of flammable liquid that hit the burning zombies, causing them to erupt in flames and incinerate more enemies. Meanwhile, Misha chanted the sanctuary spell, creating a magic circle around them. A flash of light erupted, melting all the undead inside and turning them to dust. Everyone was stunned by this ability, and Misha explained it was a priest-level skill. However, she felt extremely hungry afterward, so everyone gave her some snacks to help her recover. Suki told the other 3 girls to rest, because it was now her and Lionel's turn to act. She drew her sword and quickly cut down the zombies in front of her, clearing a path for Lionel to attack the leech. She teased him, saying that if he wanted to thank her, he should give her a kiss. Lionel replied that he would when she was older. Meanwhile, the leech never expected to run into a hero at this very inn. This city was supposed to be the starting point for his invasion, where he would turn the citizens into part of his undead army. Lionel didn't listen and charged at the leech, the undead monster. He thrust his sword straight into it. And the leech realized too late that it was a holy weapon. He lamented being caught by surprise, but his magic was already depleted, leaving him with nothing to do but crumble into dust and be carried away by the wind. Lionel stood firm, victorious like a true hero. Lionel stepped into a clearing and saw the view of the ruined Piran castle. He checked his map and wondered if the leech had come from this place. The area between the castle and the town was completely uninhabited, so the leech couldn't have turned anyone into a zombie. Therefore, it must have used summoning magic, which is why its power was depleted when they fought it. It had targeted the roadside inn, planning to turn the people there into its undead soldiers. Lionel realized how lucky they were to have stopped its plan, and that if it had actually managed to grow its army, it would have been terrifying. Mirialia wondered if it was just a coincidence. Suki told her not to overthink it, because luck is a part of life. Misha added that it wasn't actually that complicated. Afterward, they planned their next move, and Meg said she would take the lead if they needed to be stealthy. However, Lionel asserted that they didn't know what was inside, or how many enemies were hiding there, or who was ruling the castle. Therefore, he said they would have to go straight through the front door. Suki was thrilled to hear that, but Mirialia was a little worried. The strategist explained that it was the lost traveler tactic. If the master of the castle was a good person, they wouldn't turn away people in need. If they were bad guys who had taken over the castle, they would want to interrogate the intruders. Either way, they'd be allowed inside. Suki then wondered if their outfits would attract attention, since they clearly looked like adventurers. Lionel replied that it wasn't a problem, because it would be strange for merchants to be in this remote area, and their gender ratio was too odd to pretend to be refugees. So they could only be adventurers exploring the area in the Demon King's territory. Mylene approached her master with grave news. The orb of domination had been stolen from the treasury. The culprit left a farewell letter before taking their own life, but the orb's hiding place remains a mystery. The old woman wondered if the war-hungry faction of nobles was growing impatient, since the previous Demon Kings were always ready to attack at a moment's notice. She suggested that now was the time to reclaim the land seized by humanity. Furthermore, she had heard whispers of discontent regarding the current king's moderate stance. Ingrel listened thoughtfully to the old woman's long speech. He thought that his father and grandfather never actually intended to invade, but were just putting on a show, pretending to prepare for war. Most of the monsters were content with their lives. Besides, it was warm here, and the crops were bountiful. Why would they give that up just to invade a cold, poor human kingdom? The old woman saw that her words were going in one ear and out the other, and angrily shouted, asking if he was even listening. Ingrel told the old woman to take care of herself and suggested she get some rest. The old woman left the room, but not without scolding him that he would be the death of her. Afterward, Ingrel turned to Mylene, saying that sometimes he just wanted to mock those who only ever talked about war. The younger generation of monsters couldn't understand the older generation's hatred for humanity. Ingrel figured the elders were probably still bitter, because their lands and culture had been stolen from them. This was likely the reason the jewel was stolen as well. He thought the thief's death seemed suspicious. and instructed Mylene to ensure the thief's remaining family was well cared for, while also continuing the investigation. Mylene agreed, saying they had to extinguish this flame immediately before it spread among the people. She ordered her soldiers to be vigilant for any unusual movements, especially in the Gairia wilderness. Her soldiers immediately teleported away. Left alone, Ingrel looked at Mylene with a gentle gaze and said it was a good thing he had replaced the old woman as leader. She moved closer, preparing for a private moment, only to be interrupted by a female monster who had stayed behind, making a nuisance of herself. Mylene said that she should have vanished the moment she was given the order. The two women bickered for a moment, then Mylene said she'd already given the order. So why was her subordinate still here? Salieri replied that she'd rather sneak into the shadows, as that would be a more interesting mission. Mylene asked for the reason, and the female monster replied that the leader had trusted her, allowing Salieri to go abroad and uncover mysteries. However, she was to be careful and not act rashly if she met someone who caught her eye. Salieri saluted, saying yes, sir, with a mischievous glint in her eye before vanishing. The Hope clan headed straight for the castle gate, but were stopped by a guard who demanded they state their identities. Lionel played innocent, saying they were lost adventurers. Then, he noticed the horns on the guard's head and realized he was a monster. People in the capital considered them the mortal enemies of humanity. But things were different in Gairia. Gairia's economy thrived on secret trade with the monster kingdom of Maslur. The monsters had made a deal with Count Dross, promising to provide adequate education and support for the orphanages. As a result, the industry flourished, receiving numerous subsidies. There were also those who rounded up children for profit, or those who sought refuge in the Thieves' Guild. Some people felt disgusted at the mere mention of monsters. Lionel decided to be cautious, asking the guard if they could have shelter for the night. The guard was surprised at first, but then laughed and welcomed them inside. He led them to a guest room. Mirialia was surprised they'd gotten in so easily. This is where the real test begins. As Lionel had said, they would need to adapt to any situation that might arise. Once inside, Meg would pretend to go to the restroom and scout the castle's interior. Misha and Suki, under the guise of attending a worship service, would memorize the path to the cathedral. Mirialia would stay with Lionel to strategize. They had 30 minutes until the meal, so Lionel asked them to be back in under 15 minutes. Just then, a monster walked in and saw the human guests. But the three girls immediately spoke up, each stating her own objective in a cute voice, leaving the monsters speechless. Mirialia was a little sad, thinking she'd been left behind because she wasn't charming enough. But Lionel tried to comfort her by saying he trusted her intellect and that she had a mature way of thinking. She misunderstood, thinking he was implying they could share a bed, but he awkwardly clarified the situation while she blushed a little. Even so, she looked at him with hopeful eyes, and he realized he might have spoken without thinking things through. Just then, the three girls returned, but Lionel told them to save their reports for after dinner, since they could be summoned at any moment. Suki noticed Mirialia's expression, and they exchanged mischievous glances. They told Misha she would be next, and Misha said she just needed to sneak into Lionel's bed. Lionel saw his four friends giggling again and wondered what they were plotting. Just then, a knock on the door announced that dinner was ready and Lord Zakrant was waiting. Lord Zakrant welcomed them, appearing as a cheerful, middle-aged nobleman in elegant attire. Lionel thanked him for his hospitality and expressed his gratitude. Zakrant said that life here could be quite dull, so he was delighted to have them. Lionel thought this was a good time to relax a bit and introduce his team. Zakrant then revealed that he was a descendant of a demon clan and explained that he had been entrusted with protecting this fortress by the Demon King for the past 500 years. The duty of protecting this castle was his family's responsibility. However, they were descendants of those who had witnessed the horrors of the war 500 years ago, when the Demon King's army clashed with humanity. The decisive battle took place on the Sommel Plains. But Piran Castle did not become a battlefield. Instead, it became a refuge for deserters from the demon army, those who had abandoned the war. Zakrant's father gave those demons shelter, helping to avoid bloodshed. The Demon King was defeated and moved south, where he established a new nation. Meanwhile, humanity suffered such heavy losses that they couldn't give chase, leaving Piran Castle abandoned. The Demon King later died from his battle wounds, and a new king took the throne. Wars continued to break out among the human nations as they divided the land, and the fear of demons gradually faded with each generation. With time, the Demon King also forgot about the deserters from a century ago. So, they decided to settle in Piran. Then, 80 years ago, the current Demon King ascended the throne and began secret trade dealings with Giria. Because of that, the people nearby probably already knew that demons lived in this castle. Suki then remarked that the treasures from before came from this castle. Zakrant understood what she meant and explained that not long ago, a man had come to talk. A flashback shows a demon telling Zakrant that it was time to reclaim their ancestral lands. Zakrant refused the offer, saying that while they did not submit to humans, they lived independently in the castle, and then sent the visitor away. Lionel then analyzed what he knew so far. Piran Castle had existed for 500 years, and the leech that attacked the inn had passed through Piran. He concluded that the residents here had nothing to do with the monster mutations. After that person contacted Zakrant, someone led the leech to attack Piran Castle, but it was defeated. Lionel still wondered why a leech was used for the castle raid, when a powerful cyclops or a winged beast would have been much more suitable. Mirialia suggested that perhaps it was some kind of experiment. They were testing their ability to control stronger monsters, like the leech and the chimera from the Labyrinth. The discussion was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps, as the ground outside the castle began to shake. A horde of giant cyclopes was approaching. The castle bells rang out, signaling an attack on the walls. Lionel and Zakrant watched the horde of cyclopes and realized they were facing an enemy with a high capacity for learning. A cyclops picked up a large boulder and threw it at the castle, breaching the wall. Lionel said it was only a matter of time before they brought the whole thing down. Zakrant apologized for dragging the group into this mess. But Lionel replied that humans couldn't exactly stay out of it. He offered to help, which Zakrant appreciated, but he still wondered what chance they had against such giant foes. Lionel answered that the enemy's goal was to capture the castle. He deduced this from their attack strategy, targeting the walls and gate to create an entrance, trying to minimize structural damage because they want to use this castle as a base for their invasion of the Rintlight Kingdom. Lionel whispered to Zakrant that he had a plan. Zakrant listened and then ordered everyone to the armory. They deployed giant ballistae and fired a volley of massive arrows at the enemy. The arrows pierced through the thick hides of the Cyclops herd. Zakrant ordered the guards to keep firing, and eventually wiped out all the monsters. Zakrant warned them to prepare for a second wave, but Lionel said they wouldn't be back. There was no reason for them to hold back, so they threw every monster they had at us. Now, the enemy realizes that neither the magical power of the leeches nor the brute force of the Cyclops is enough. Lionel wondered what they would do next. Lionel guessed that the enemy would switch to a traditional siege, with a massive infantry assault to smash the castle gate. This tactic usually results in heavy casualties for the attackers, but the enemy doesn't care. They wouldn't feel a thing even if they lost hundreds of soldiers. A prolonged siege would deplete our supplies and cause the castle to fall. But Lionel asserted that it wouldn't last long, and he would reveal why when the time was right. They began to repair the damage. A short while later, as the demons were busy repairing the walls, a goblin army suddenly rushed in to attack. The guards quickly retreated into the castle. A goblin's head was split in two. Suki had joined the fray, taking down the monsters one by one from the ramparts. Zakrant realized Lionel had cleverly focused the repairs in a way that funneled the enemy into a single path, where they could easily be picked off one by one. Lionel had also deduced that the enemy had no flying monsters for reconnaissance, so he had left only the main gate open. They might have suspected a trap, but after seeing the chaotic patchwork repairs from the battle, they let their guard down. A demon was gravely wounded by a stab, but was instantly healed by Misha's magic. She declared that she would heal every wound so the soldiers could fight with confidence. Just then, they spotted a goblin that had snuck into the castle, but Meg quickly beheaded it. Lionel realized this was the moment the enemy would retreat and ordered Mirialia to unleash a volley of magical projectiles. Wiping out most of the fleeing goblins, Zakrant praised Lionel for his brilliant strategy. But he humbly said that anyone who knew basic tactics could have done it. Lionel also praised the demon soldiers for their discipline and their ability to understand their commander's intent. As for the attackers, they called themselves the Junii, a group claiming to be the elders of the kingdom. They kept talking about demon pride but couldn't produce any decree from the demon lord. So Zakrant sent them away. Lionel speculated that this was a splinter group of demons, acting against the demon lord's will. If that's the case, there will surely be an official order to hunt them down and suppress them. He also figured that no such magic to control monsters like that exists, so they were probably using an ancient artifact. Besides wanting to use the castle as a staging ground to invade Rintlight, they also planned to use it as a defensive point against pursuers from the demon lord. However, Lionel clarified that this was all just speculation, and suggested they stop theorizing to focus on preparing for a potential attack, with no reinforcements coming and the possibility of stray monsters attacking the city. Lionel decided the best plan was for the Hope clan to move out and destroy the Junii. Suki was excited by the idea, but Mirialia worried that the enemy would set up an ambush. Right as they left the castle, Lionel reassured her that they would be fine, since the enemy had already failed twice. If they showed any sign of weakness, the enemy would suspect it was a trap. He then asked Zakrant if he could borrow some warriors. Zakrant happily agreed, wondering what this brilliant strategist had planned. That night, the Hope clan walked through the forest and encountered the remnants of the attack on the castle. These goblins attacked them, but they dealt with them easily. However, Lionel warned that these goblins were just pawns meant to wear them down, and that the enemy was likely preparing a new wave of attacks. Meg wondered what their plan was, and Lionel pointed to a cave. He said the important part was to see where the creatures were coming from. By following the retreating goblins, they would pinpoint the location of the main camp. He ordered the group to take a detour before confronting the ambush. They quickly rushed past the goblins, luring them from behind. Then, they encountered a group of ogres. Lionel guessed that these were the elite guards protecting Yune. The strategist also remarked that the enemy had made a mistake by not including them in the attack force. Suki and the demon warriors charged in to attack the monsters. One warrior was so fast that she goaded an ogre into chasing her. It took the bait and gave chase, leaving Suki to wonder why it would do something so foolish. Lionel replied that these monsters weren't smart, but the real fool was Gyune, who couldn't handle things properly. Suki led the monsters to the ambush point, where Mirialia cast an ice spell. Sharp spikes of ice shot up from the ground, piercing their bodies and immobilizing them. The warriors easily beheaded the ogre. Misha was disappointed that no one was injured, so there was no need for healing. However, Suki had a bruised back from 2 hits, which pleased Misha. Lionel said the next step was to find the leader. However, Meg said that wasn't necessary, as Yunai was already passed out on the ground. She pointed to his unconscious form and said he was too busy screaming orders at the ogres to notice her sneaking up from behind. Lionel looked at the unconscious enemy, a bit surprised at how easily he was captured. He ordered the soldiers to take the body back to the castle and contact the Masler kingdom. Lionel noticed a shadowy figure hiding behind the trees and wondered if there were more enemies. It was Salieri, who stepped out and said she wasn't an enemy, but was there to capture the slacker beside the female dark elf. Salieri had always been misunderstood since she was a child because of her perpetually dreamy expression. Adults often scolded her, telling her not to daydream. Despite that, she was an excellent student and always balanced her studies, but no one appreciated her efforts. Gradually, Salieri began to hate her own appearance. One day, when she was assigned to guard the border, another elf asked if she could switch duties, as he found inspecting farms too boring and thought it was a perfect job for a daydreamer like her. At that moment, she realized it was a weapon. She told Lionel she was one of the kingdom's elite special operatives and was highly skilled in assassination and reconnaissance. Meg thought Salieri was being careless for revealing all that information. She looked into Lionel's eyes, who realized Salieri's style was to play the fool to make people lower their guard. Salieri was impressed, as fewer than 10 people could recognize that at first glance. She approached Lionel, looking as if she wanted to seduce him. But Suki immediately stepped between them. Misha hugged Lionel tightly from behind, while Mirelia held his hand protectively. The whole group returned to the castle together. Zakrent was relieved that the prisoner was securely detained. Salieri then asked for help in drafting a report for the kingdom's government, asking them to disclose every detail leading up to the battle while she took notes. Lionel continued to watch her, trying to guess her motives. She told him to stop staring at her, saying his gaze was as sharp as hers, and that perhaps they were truly alike. After finishing the report, she summoned a messenger bird to send the letter to the border fortress. Suki was impressed as they watched the bird fly away. Lionel asked how long they would have to wait for a response. Salieri calculated that it would take about 5 days. Lionel thought she shouldn't be so careless with important information like troop positions. She added that, in fact, her cousin was the sovereign's secretary. So everything at the sovereign's castle was fine. Mylene handed the report to Ingral, saying that Salieri might not seem outstanding, but she actually had a lot of potential. Ingral opened the letter and was moved to tears as he read its contents. He concluded that the proper gesture would be to invite the people of Piran to the royal palace to express their immense gratitude. Mylene remarked that the writing was concise and orderly, but also wondered about certain parts of the letter. Ingral wasn't sure either, but he focused on handling the situation. Salieri had said they should honor those who achieved great things, which meant inviting the people of Piran to the castle. A grand banquet would be held where they would receive their rewards. However, those people were citizens of the Lint-Light Kingdom, their sworn enemy. As for Piran, this would be like summoning the head of an independent nation. Mylene noted that they would have to invite the adventurers to attend, regardless of whether they were individuals or part of a faction. Ingral saw no other way. As for the Lord of Piran, they would normally plan ahead in a meeting and then act cautiously, but Salieri had already crossed that line. So negotiations would be very difficult. They still didn't know how they would view this relationship with the Demon Kingdom, and the presence of humans would complicate things further. Mylene then offered to go to the castle herself ahead of time. Ingral was delighted to hear this, and reminded her to go as his secretary, not his lover. She just laughed and told him he was worrying too much. He also told her to watch what she said, as inappropriate jokes could make things worse. He then praised her as his most trusted subordinate and said that her absence would leave a void in his heart. She smiled, then assured him she would handle everything carefully. At the castle, repairing the walls would take several days. Besides time, it would also require a lot of money. Zakrent said that they could earn more money, and that material things could be rebuilt or replaced, but nothing could replace a life once it was lost. Therefore, that was what they had to cherish most. Zakrent wondered why such a brilliant strategist would complain about such minor repair costs, and Lionel replied that it was because he was out of money, which surprised the Lord a little. Lionel continued, saying that 15 days had passed, and the envoy from the demon realm would soon arrive as scheduled. He noticed Mylene and Ingral in the distance, and they entered the castle together, welcoming them and exchanging greetings. Mylene then revealed that the demon lord wanted to make Zakrent's territory a vassal state. Lionel thought this move could create tension in the demon realm, possibly even leading to war. The lord fell silent for a moment, letting everyone in the room wait, then surprised them all by cheerfully agreeing without any hesitation. He even insisted on deciding the tax rates immediately. Lionel was a bit bewildered to see Zakrent decide such an important matter so casually. The Lord explained that his ancestors only forbade participating in war. If the current demon lord desired peace with humans, he would support it. Mylene thanked Zakrent for his wise decision And even Lionel was impressed by the Lord's reasoning and straightforwardness. Lionel imagined the idea of humans and demons living together in peace, and realized that if the demon lord made any mistakes, Zakrant would rise up immediately, without a second thought. Mylene changed the subject, saying she wanted to invite them all to the royal capital. She formally introduced everyone to Lord Ingril, the demon lord. The demon lord and Zakrant shook hands, looking forward to building a better future together. Mylene knelt, formally inviting them, but Zakrant smiled and told her to rise. Suki was excited to explore, and Misha was ready to sniff out some delicious food. And while Meg wished she had more pocket money for shopping, Suki suggested they rob a group of bandits for cash. But Lionel gave them a look and reminded them they weren't just there to have fun. Mirialia was thinking about the political implications. Piran Castle existed even before the Kingdom of Lintlight, and originally, it didn't belong to any nation. When the human kingdom was established, they drew the borders, and inadvertently included the castle in their territory. If Demon Lord Masuru turned this place into a vassal state, it would be like they were carving off a piece of Lintlight's territory. However, thanks to its location near the border and the Demon Lord's protection, the castle would likely be safe and become a deterrent to war. The situation was further complicated by rumors of rebellions spreading throughout Lintlight. Although there were important figures like General Kaidos keeping things under control, a swift coup was still not feasible. Suki chimed in, saying these conversations were boring. Lionel told her she should go to her room then, and also announced it was their bedtime. He shooed the 4 girls off to their bedroom. The next morning, the group was ready to head to the border. Lionel wondered if it was safe to go without any protection. However, Zakrant wasn't worried, as the Hope clan was accompanying them. Furthermore, Salieri was a powerful warrior, and even Suki admitted she was very strong. Her innate ability was that of a magic swordsman, so her presence opened up more strategic options. He could pair the Dark Elf with Suki to form a powerful 2-top formation, or he could focus on a command role in the middle. They could even form a dynamic duo with Mirialia as a magic user combo, or with Meg as stealth attackers with their cloaking skills. Misha felt a little sad for not being mentioned in the options, but Lionel told her that her role was clearly defined and extremely important. She immediately cheered up. In the Kingdom of Lintlight, General Kiros was engaging the rebel forces. He ordered his soldiers to cut down anyone who betrayed the nation. After their victory, they looked at the enemy's corpses and discovered that one of the rebels was an adventurer who had accompanied the army on the last mountain hunt. The soldiers were confused and astonished that he had foolishly allied himself with the rebel forces. However, General Kiros saw this as a bad omen, believing that his own nation was the foolish one.